Former Biden staffer Annie Tomasini pleading the fifth to questions on President Biden's mental fitness in a closed-door interview yesterday. She's the third aide to dodge questions in the House Oversight Committee's probe. We still expect to hear from Biden's former chief of staff, Ron Klain, and Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre over the next few months. But will we get any answers from these allies? Bluestack Strategies founder Maura Gillespie is with me now. Maura, thank you so much for being here. We have Biden's personal physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor. You have Anthony Burnell, the personal assistant to Jill Biden. And now you have Annie Tomasini here, who was very close to the Oval Office, all deciding not to take part in this GOP investigation into President Biden's mental acuity, his use of the auto pen. Do you think this is what we will be seeing over and over and over again, and to what end?
Unfortunately, I do. I think that when Ron Klain comes in before the House Oversight Committee next week, as you mentioned, I think he is going to probably do similar. I think Anita Dunn, who is scheduled to be there early August, will probably also do the same. But it's an unfortunate situation because while I understand they probably don't want to incriminate themselves, but because they were likely making the bulk of the decisions, but they do share. Ron Klain shares a lion's share of the responsibility here and what happened. And I think as a nation, we're going to be reeling from this situation for a long time because the unknown about who is in charge at the Biden White House is jarring, it is concerning, and we do need to get to the bottom of it. And it may end up, causing us to think about age and moving forward as we look to our leaders and who we elect. That cognitive ability is very important, and the fact that it was not considered by the people who are serving the institution of the White House. We call the White House, we also call the Capitol the People's House because they represent and serve the people. So many people in those positions, like Ron Klain and Anita Dunn, unfortunately to me, what that says is ego. And I think that in serving in these administrations, serving in these positions of leadership, you're a civil servant. It's a responsibility and it's a privilege, but so many people are there for power trips that it's really disheartening to see that play out and could be potentially damaging to us as a nation.
Maura, do you think that there should be pressure on Biden former officials from the Democratic Party itself to take part in some form of this investigation, or to try to be more forthright with what really happened if we expect the Democratic Party to move on from what occurred with President Biden? I mean, is there going to be any accountability, and do you think the Democratic Party will demand that?
I don't know that they will, but that doesn't mean that they should. I think that there is something to be said about where we go from here. Yes, we do need to get accountability about what happened. But to your point, what does the Democratic Party look like in the future if we don't address what happened in the Biden White House? And so I do have reservations about, this pleading of the fifth, not giving any insight into some of the decisions that were made, who was in charge at certain critical moments during those 4 years. It's, like I said, it's disheartening because it's a civil service position, and people obviously felt as though they were in charge and enjoyed that feeling. But we do need to have some reckoning. And I think as a Democratic Party, and you saw some senators who spoke out about it after the fact. And I think maybe they could put some pressure on some lower staff level officials who I understand want to be loyal to their boss and to their former bosses. I understand the importance of loyalty, and they don't want to badmouth somebody who gave them a position, but they need to be accountable. They need to share what happened for us to move on as a nation.
Yeah, it certainly speaks to the level of trust and transparency here, which is going to be essential to anyone's campaign, you would think, moving forward. And this would be a good way to try to win back voters, whether or not they believe in Comer or the Republican investigation. There has to be something here for the American people to try to get some answers in all of this. Maura Gillespie,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.